Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Farhan Gabru. I work for FHI 360. FHI 360 is a global organization working in over 60 countries, advancing equity, health, and well-being through data-driven and locally led solutions. And today we'll be presenting about our intervention in Senegal together with Erica, who would introduce herself, and then I will continue after Erica set the introduction. Erica, over to you.
Thanks, Berhani. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We're excited you chose to spend a little bit of your afternoon with us. So my name is Erica. I'm from Qualcomm Wireless Reach. Some of you, probably a lot of you might not be familiar with us, but Qualcomm is a global semiconductor company, and we design a lot of the chips that go in your phones, your computers, and kind of everything else that's now being connected to the internet. And specifically, I'm from Wireless Reach, which is our Tech for Good initiative. We implement a lot of programs around the globe and have been doing so for the past 17 or more now years in the areas of health, education, environmental sustainability, public safety, and economic empowerment. And we've been working with FHI 360 on this project and others for many years, and we're excited to share with you.
Thank you, Erica. So this initiative is on the use of digital technologies for supporting the blue economy in Senegal. And we wanted to share the role of fisheries in Senegal in terms for its economy. Senegal have a very large coastline extending probably about 550 to 600 kilometers on the Atlantic Ocean. So it has a lot of marine resources. So fishery in Senegal contributes to about 11% of the primary gross domestic product, or GDP. It employs over 17% of the workforce in the country. About 600,000 people are employed directly or indirectly by the fishery sector. And fish and other seafood, they represent about 70% of protein intake from animals. That is without considering like from other plant-based sources. So it has a very, very significant role in the livelihood, in the overall, in the macroeconomy, in the household income of Senegal, the Senegal population and economic system. And on the fisheries sector, about 90% of the fish catch and the fish that is processed comes through artisanal fishery. So the artisanal fishery is fisher folks who use small canoes and non-mechanized gears, and who use only ice for preserving their catch. So the artisanal fishery was the fish processors as well as the fisher folks who catch the fish catch probably about 440,000 metric tons of fish a year. About 90% of, between 475 to 500,000 metric tons of the total catch. So the highly commercialized fish catch constitutes about 90%. So our intervention focuses on the artisanal fishery sector of Senegal. And the key players in this value chain include the fishermen, the fisher folks, predominantly almost 100% men, the fishmongers and wholesale buyers and sellers. So the fishmongers buy fish from the fishermen and they sell it at retail value to householders and small restaurants. And the whole buyers buy from the fishermen. So some of them, they would export it primarily to other West African-based countries, primarily, but it also goes to other countries, even China. They also sell it to fish processors. So the fish processors could also directly buy from the fishermen. So the fishmongers and wholesale buyers are in between the fishermen and the other market outlets. And there are also fish processors, almost 100% women. And the fish processing, it's based on traditional methods, which includes drying the fish, salting it, and fermenting it. They also extract oil from during the fermentation process. And their market is predominantly in Senegal, but they also export it to other West African countries, about 15 or 16 countries in West Africa. So these are our focus beneficiaries. So the project that we have, WISE, it stands for the project name Wireless Solutions for Fisheries in Senegal. It addresses the key challenges of the artisanal fishery, which is the main outlet through which the fish resources are extracted and distributed. So the key challenges of the artisanal fishery sector, it include first limited access to affordable loan, and the second is limited access to banking services. The lack of availability of banking services at the fish landing and processing sites is cited as one of the problems. And the first one, access to capital, access to affordable loan, because they want to buy inputs for processing, for example, for the fish processors, or they want to buy engine for their boats, or they want to buy other supplies like nets. So that access to capital is a big problem. The third on the left is access to market prices information to enable them to sell it at competitive prices for their fresh catch as well as for processed fish. Navigation resources, that is access to reliable weather and navigation information. Here especially the ocean state forecast is extremely relevant for the fishermen, also for the fish processors, enables them plan the processing of their fish. For example, if it's raining, they may not be able to keep the fish for processing outside. So for the fishermen, the ocean state forecast, which provides the wave heights at different times of the day, wind direction, these are extremely important for them. And the other is safety and security related information or mechanism. So sometimes the fishermen would go out fishing for an extended period, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they say, in the ocean. And during this time, when they are out in the ocean, and anything could go wrong. There could be a failure of engine. They could hit coral reefs, for example, in the ocean. So in situations like that, they will not have any mechanism for them to be rescued. So that is another challenge that this initiative addresses. And finally, access to fish processing practices, access to health information, access to best practices on fish processing, and expert advice. So the expert advice is, in case they have any questions or any issues related to their practice, they don't have any mechanism whom they would contact. So that is another area the initiative addresses. So we will go through how we approach it to address these key challenges through a multi-stakeholder collaboration. So the government ministries are there. So from the government, we have the Ministry of Digital Economy and Telecommunications, we have the Ministry of Fishery, And CSA, that is the Food Security Commission of Senegal, it's a government entity. FHI 360 is the lead implementing agency, and Qualcomm funds this program as well as provides technology leadership in developing the solution. And we have a mobile network operator free with whom we work, and there is a local NGO Intermons. So I will hand it over to my colleague Erica from Qualcomm to explain what we did. Erica, over to you.
Thank you, Burhani. And my connection is up and down, so if ever you can't hear me, just let me know. But hopefully it holds. So thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to take us through the impact that we've seen, or the implementation as well as the impact of the program. So here on this first slide is really a snapshot of our reach. During the course of implementation, our partners on the ground, which is primarily FHI and Intermons, which Burhani just mentioned, we're able to train nearly 6,500 fisher folk. So fishermen, which he mentioned, are primarily or 100% really men. So we're going to refer to them as fishermen, and the fish processors were predominantly women. So a majority, or nearly 4,600 of these were the fishermen, and about 1,900 almost were fish processors. So the way we reached these individuals was through economic interest groups, or EIGs. And in this case, EIGs are cooperatives that the fishermen and fish processors are part of in their local geography. So the EIGs were our primary vehicle for engaging with the beneficiaries, and they were really central to the diffusion of the WISE app and some of the wraparound services. So our partners trained members of over 200 EIGs from 6 of Senegal's major artisanal fish landing and processing sites, which you see on the map here. And in addition to accessing services through the EIG, the members of the cooperative also participated in training of trainers. So this is an interesting model I'm sure you're all familiar with. We can talk more about if there's questions later. But in turn, these trainers then trained other users, and that really helped spread beyond the initial fish processors and fishermen who were part of our initial trainings. So one more note here before we move to the next slide. I think it's really interesting to say we think that the WISE platform can really go beyond the fisheries sector, which is part of why we're here today. And specifically, we think a similar approach can be used to expand WISE to agriculture. So for example, there are agricultural extension agents, and we think if we train them to use the WISE system, access location-specific weather and climate information and agricultural advisories, similar to what we have for the fishermen on the WISE app currently. And then you enable these agents to provide the necessary support to farmers that this platform can really transcend, or different sectors. So Burhani, can I ask you to move on to the next slide? So we're going to go through the main functionalities of the WISE app. There are 12, and these are designed to help everyone with their daily business activities. We're going to go more into this later towards the end of the presentation, but I think, and everybody knows this, but we really cannot overstate the importance of this iterative consultation process that it took with the EIGs to get to this point. So this platform, from the services offered to the user experience and the functionalities, they've been designed and iterated upon together with the end users over the years. This program has been in place since 2014. Burhani can say what year it actually first, the app actually first entered into the program. I think it was probably 2015, and we've been developing upon it since then. So if we go into the next slide, we can touch on the first of the main functionalities here. So you see the first 6 here. So from the app, the users can access market information. So this is such as daily market prices. This is helping fishermen and fish processors obtain the best price for their goods. So this is an electronic market information system. It helps the government's Food Security Commission, CSA, collect and transfer this fish market data in real time. And then it's disseminating these bulletins on fish market data to end users, so specifically the fishermen, the fish processors, but also to country governments in the nearby area who are using this data to in turn, plan some of their own activities. So there's also weather and ocean forecasts that help fishers know when and where to plan their routes to ensure their safety and maximize their chances of a successful trip. We know that fuel is very expensive, so you don't want to use, those valuable the resources and your time, your opportunity costs to go out on a trip that is unsuccessful. So these are pretty critical services that we heard from the end users that they wanted to see in the app. So if we go into the next slide, we'll see the next the other six remaining functionalities. So you're also seeing here features like GPS navigation tools and SOS messaging capabilities. So in case of an emergency, it's providing an additional layer of safety, especially when the fishermen are out at sea. There's a media section here. It includes a lot of information around best practices, from fish safety to fish processing hygiene. And then you see here there's 2 or 3 features on financial and health tools. So these include calculators, and they help the users estimate loan payments and health insurance premiums. And we'll come back to the loan payments in a moment. But yeah, these are the 6 here. And then we'll go on to the next slide. Berhani, please. So we had a third party come in and conduct an evaluation, a retrospective evaluation of the program. And they asked users what they thought were the top business benefits of using WISE. So looking first at the top half of the slide here, you can see a majority of the fish processors felt that the top benefit was the use of market information to receive more competitive prices for their goods. Nearly 100%. 88% also believe the information available through the app improved the quality of their production or fish processing practices, which in turn allows them to then sell their goods for a higher price. And then for the fishermen, the biggest perceived benefit was that access to weather and ocean condition information allowed them to better plan their activities and, again, their resources for every trip they take. Not only is it risky, there's a lot of inputs, again, such as fuel costs. There's a lot of other financial resources that go into planning the trip. And then, again, that time and opportunity cost. And then second to that, they found that the information through the marketplace was also useful to accessing more competitive pricing for their catch. And then if we want to go on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the microcredit. So we briefly mentioned one of the services available on the app is related to microfinance. So in addition to training on microfinance, so the beneficiaries, in this case, the women, were in a better position to access affordable financing for their businesses. We also provided nearly $23,000 in credits as well. So over the course of the program, 100 of the fish processors received microfinance training, and this helped them establish or learn how to establish microfinance management committees. So, I think this is common. For many, loans from a bank are either inaccessible, or unaffordable. So the more reasonable interest rates offered here and the repayment periods were really well received. You see here, they had a repayment or an interest rate of 5% compared to at banks it can run upwards of 20%, which I think in the US we would call a predatory loan. So women reported that they were using their loans to pay their children's school tuition, purchasing food for their households. Sorry. Buying engines. Pardon me? Can you still hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Yes, okay. Okay, sorry. Buying engines and renting them out to the fishermen, which I liked that one. Providing supplemental funding to purchase land and more. I think these are common themes that we find in microfinancing programs with women. So you can see the distribution here of finances across the fish landing sites, and it really maps to the size of the sites and the makeup of the EIGs. And then we can move on to, I think, our the next, and I think a really impactful takeaway here in the next slide. So here we looked further into our findings, and what you see here is an extremely significant increase in average annual income across both fish processors and fishermen as a result of using WISE. So as I mentioned just now, collectively, the program's offerings enabled them to, they're increasing their fish catch. They know where to go, right? They know when's the best time to go out. The fish processors are increasing their fish processing capacity due to access to this, information. And in turn, they're also able to access the best market prices, as we mentioned, through this marketplace. And all of this is collectively contributing to increasing their incomes. And so in a country where the average per capita GDP reached an all-time high in 2022 of just shy of $1,500 US, this represents a 20 to 27% increase for fishers and fish processors, respectively. So these are not normally figures you see. So we were really impressed and pleased to find that, and these are self-reported numbers, but we were really impressed and pleased to see the impact. And this is after 1 year of using the WISE platform and services. These were the results we were seeing. So I think that concludes my portion. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Burhani.
Can I ask a question? Just quick question. Because, so Erica, the numbers look really impressive, as you said, because the WISE platform provides so many kind of services and different functions. Do you have information on exactly which part of the platform provide the most income boost?
That's a great question, and maybe we can tag team this one. But based on the results that we saw, my understanding, again, this is self-reported data, but is really the marketplace information, which really allowed people to, again, sell their goods at a higher price in most cases. And then also, I think the information for the fish processors, because that really improved the capacity. I think in some cases it was like 10 times the capacity of what they were able to process in 1 year, which obviously is going to have an incremental effect on your income as well. So I think that those two were probably the key, the largest pieces, but I think Burhani can also provide a lot more detail in his perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you, Erica, very much. I think in terms of attribution, which one contributed the most, as Erica noted, the market information is the same for both fish processors and fishermen, and that is one of the major ones, because they are able to sell their products not only in Senegal, but also in other West African countries, especially for the processed fish. Sometimes they also come and buy fresh fish. For myself, I saw a group who came from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, to Senegal to buy tuna in large quantities, and then they would give it to the fish processors to process. So it involves buying from the fishermen, from the fisher folks, and then giving it to the fish processors. So that access to market information is one of the key contributors. And as you might have noticed, the fish processors like 25% more compared to the fishermen higher in income because of the intervention. I mean, we can't say 100% because of the intervention. There could be other factors as well, but it's a major contributor. But the reason is because the fish processors, the women fish processors, have access to affordable loan at 5% interest rate compared to about 20%. So the seed money that was provided to the cooperatives, it's used as a revolving fund. And it's a very short maturity period. So it's like 6 months or a year, they have to repay it back. But it goes back to them. So that's why we see that increased access to capital also contributing more to the fish processors. Yeah, thank you for that question. So moving ahead, as Erica explained, we are working in 3 major fish landing and 6 actually fish landing and processing sites in Dakar, Mbour, and there is an area called Joal. Probably, I don't know, about 50% of the fish that is caught in Senegal through the artisanal fishery is in those 3, but there are also others, for example, at the top St. Louis. There are also other fish landing and processing sites. So if you see in terms of the number of fisher folks and fish processors that we are reaching, about 6,500, but there are probably between 30,000 to 40,000 fishermen and fish processors in artisanal fisheries. So how do we scale up to the other sites throughout Senegal? So we have adopted 2 approaches. One is a policy pathway where we encourage government adoption, and the second is market-based approach. So we are pursuing both approaches. So on the government adoption, as Erica noted, we started the project in 2014, and then the design of the intervention, not only the technology. I mean, the technology is probably a smaller subset compared to the other process-related, institution-related interventions. So we started towards the end of 2016 in terms of deploying the first iteration of the mobile app and the portal. So from the very beginning, we worked through government leadership. We were part of that implementation, even though we were the lead implementing partner, but the actual leadership was taken by the government. So it involved the Ministry of Digital Economy and Telecommunications, the Food Security Commission of Senegal. There is an entity called ADIE. It's an organization for hosting government servers in Senegal, and the Ministry of Fishery and Maritime Economy. So the server was from the get-go hosted at the government server hosting entity. The market information system, the fish market information system, was built together with the Food Security Commission of Senegal. In terms of our digital approach, it was in full compliance with Digital Senegal 2025, which is the strategic plan for Senegal's digital economy. And of course, the Ministry of Fishery and Maritime Economy, we worked with them and through their leadership in terms of expanding the program. So the government is fully committed to adopting it. It's being housed at the Ministry of Fishery and Maritime Economy in a department called Artisanal Fishery, and they are the ones who would be responsible for maintaining and expanding WISE from the government's perspective. We are also taking a market-based approach by working with mobile network operators. For now, we are working with a mobile network operator called Free. It used to be called Tigo. They are now Free in Senegal. And the approach is to provide the Wise mobile application as a value-add service for free. So for free, they're really not spending anything. They're just using the app and then marketing it as one of their value-add services to the fishermen and fish processors. For them, they would be attracting more subscribers to their service. And for us, it's a mechanism for ensuring that it's delivered to the fishermen and fish processors. And as part of that, they offer a much more competitive rate for selling devices, smartphones, so that they can use Wise for the different services. They also have free access to Wise based on on the URL. So even though they are subscribing to the mobile network operators, they will be paying for other services, but for accessing the Wise application, the users will not be paying. So we provided smartphones at the beginning, but now it's bring your own device model for the fishermen and fish processors. And the main selling point is that, especially for the fishermen, for the fisher folks, they've been using standalone like Garmin GPS devices to navigate to the fishing spots or to retrieve their fishing nets after some time. Using this application, we are now completing an offline mode of navigation on GPS where they do not require internet connection. So instead of buying a standalone Garmin GPS, it's cheaper to buy, an entry-level smartphone, and then that has different purposes in addition to navigation. So the bring your own device model really makes economic sense for the fishermen. So we are pursuing both policy and market-based approach for scaling up this solution. So quickly go through what we have learned and what we thought are worthy of sharing in terms of the lessons that we have learned. The first is, it sounds obvious, early government engagement and leadership is important to ensure program sustainability, but it's usually easier said than done, especially when there are multiple stakeholders from the government, two ministries, one commission, and one government server hosting entity. It's not an easy feat to get, all those players and also the private sector. But we don't really think there is a shortcut, especially if the plan is government adoption of the solution. So the players that I have mentioned previously, the Ministry of Digital Economy and Telecommunication was the lead in terms of the digital component. The Food Security Commission of Senegal was the lead in terms of the market information system, and the Ministry of Fishery was the lead in terms of engaging the different players from the national, province, and district level all the way down to the fish landing and processing sites. So that early engagement with the government was really critical in fostering a government adoption of the initiative. The second is public-private partnership in terms of developing and scaling up the digital solution. That is also very critical because I think I mentioned briefly what the government role was, but the private sector also, for example, the mobile network operator, they've been providing more affordable devices and more competitive data plans, more competitive communication between the fishermen and fish processors. That is one, but also connectivity in the ocean is, usually minimal because nobody is living there. But they were willing even to tilt the antenna towards towards the fishing spots, so that there is a better coverage. As you know, it goes 25, 30 kilometers from one tower to the other. But that also depends on several factors, but they were willing to make that enhancement. And they were also willing, because it makes more economic sense, it's more market for them, to provide more affordable devices, to design, to package a data plan, SMS, text options, and also communication between the fishermen and fish processors at a very affordable rate. So we think that partnership gave us a very powerful mechanism for scaling up the solution. And currently, in Senegal, it's available on Play Store, and any fisherman or fish processor is able to download. So the 6,500 fishermen and fish processors that we supported, but currently probably it's a bit over 10,000 in terms of the total number of users that has expanded through a combination of these approaches. And it's available in English, French, and we also have translated it, localized it partially to Swahili and Portuguese. So the Swahili, obviously, in East Africa, and Portuguese in Mozambique. It can be used because fishery is important sector in areas like Mozambique as well. So it may need some additional tweaking and adoption, but the overall framework is there to be deployed in other settings.
Do they have to be on the free network, or? No,
it could be any. No, it's not limited to free. Even the mobile money integration, it could be easily done to other, for example, Orange or Sonatel in Senegal. It could easily be integrated with other mobile network operators. Digital financial services as well. And the third is supporting the equitable participation of women. Again, this is very important, especially on credit. We try to target 50% men users, who are the fish processors, and 50% female users, who are the fish processors. In terms of the cooperatives, it's 50-50. But the number or the membership at each cooperative, usually there are more fisher folks in cooperative A than the number of fish processors who are female in cooperative B. So the total number of fishermen is more than the fish processors. But in terms of the number of cooperatives, we try to make it 50-50. But in terms of access to capital, women had less access to affordable credit, so we entirely used the resources that we had to support women for them to have better access to capital. And the last one is continuous stakeholder engagement, especially the end users. The application, it has gone through different iterations, so we have this iterative process to improve the applications. For example, at the first version, it had market and GPS capability. So we kept on adding additional services as the demand grew. For example, the offline GPS capability, we implemented it the last a year and a half or so. There is an AI-powered chat chatbots that we have integrated. That also came later, especially for illiterate folks. They would be able to communicate via voice. That was also integrated later. The SOS feature, which allows the fishermen when they are out in the ocean, whenever they face life-threatening situations, that was also added later. If they face something, they would be able to click a button, and then the coordinates of where they are would be transmitted to the Coast Guard, so that they would be able to face them from wherever they are. So all these were implemented at a later stage. So that continuous stakeholder engagement is critical for improving the quality of the services.
A bit on the women participation. So did Erica say the fishermen are actually men?
Yes.
And the only processors are women?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, this is really interesting for crop agriculture. Actually, Roberto is kind of organizing. He will present some use cases where we want to see if there are any gender pattern from growers and sellers and marketplaces. Like if women farmers prefer to sell to only women buyers, or if there is any market kind of already structured to have some genderized way, gender pattern. So yeah, I was curious if there's any specific gender pattern that you found in this fishery economy, like women processors only deal with specific group of sellers, or if it's just more market-based. So what we found in crop market is it's not totally market, it's not totally price. There is some personal preference, sometimes even some structural bias that might be the system. Yeah, I was curious if fisheries have similar patterns.
Yeah, you're right, and thank you for this. So the fishing, it's considered to be physically demanding,
Right.
and you have to go out, usually stay 2 weeks or so. So that role is usually assigned to men.
Yeah.
And fish processing, primarily kind of sedentary kind of work, and it's not that women are not able to do the fishing, but that is how how the society have assigned the roles. And in Senegal, I mean, predominantly in terms of religion, and the religions that the role of men and women is assigned to, that also plays a role. But what is interesting is some women would buy engines for the boats, and they would rent it to the to the fisher folks.
But it's a subsidy for you get the engines are subsidized.
Yeah,
by 50%. So more people access the subsidy.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's a clever way of getting more engines on two engines on one boat.
That is a good way of different way of looking at it. But that's how it is. I think there was only one male fish processor.
Only one.
Only one.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So it was minimal. That was also we had a cohort of 50 cooperatives first. So out of 50, there was one male fish processor.
Okay. Very interesting.
And if the men do the fish processing, people, especially the men compatriots, they would say, "Oh, that's a woman's role," so they would be ridiculed, and then they don't usually do it.
Very interesting. Okay,
thank you. Thanks so much. I think that is what I have, in our contact information is there for additional, but happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Yeah, so just curious about your scaling. So Erica mentioned that you're considering going beyond fishing into other areas, but also you mentioned the app has different languages, Portuguese, Swahili for Mozambique, maybe East Africa. What is the scaling picture like? Are you trying to see how you can scale not just more artisanal fishermen and fisher folk in Senegal, but also other areas in Africa?
Yeah, so we've been in discussion with some agencies, including COMESA and ECA's Economic Commission for Africa, and the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda. There was tremendous interest to adopt WISE. So we thought if we do some of the localizations, they would be able to see how it could be applied in their settings. So it would need some additional work for the platform, for the mobile, and as well as for the server part of it to be modified. But this is something which we are happy to support and provide the source code and other resources so that they would be able to expand it. So in Senegal, there is an interest from the Ministry of Digital Economy and Telecommunications to expand it to support the CSA, Climate Smart Agriculture. We are also very interested to expand it to support climate smart agriculture, because overall architecture, if you see, it can deliver, it could be a way of providing, it's a client information service, and it can provide information to farmers on whatever it is, on CSA, or whether it's weather information, improved agronomic practices, agricultural advisories. It could be used to provide that. It could be used to provide a mechanism of user support. So the user support mechanisms that we have implemented is, for example, they can take a picture of a fish, and if it is the right size, or if there is a disease, they could send it to the Ministry of Fishery, and then they could get responses or guidances from the Ministry of Fishery. So that could be applied, for example, to crop disease or animal disease, and so on. So we're planning on using this and then applying it, especially to support agriculture, other agriculture aspects. Please.
All right, yeah, so I promise I'm not asking a question just to introduce myself, but I think it's worth saying. So I'm from Millennium Challenge Corporation, and we're working with the government of Senegal. Really early on, they've asked us to prioritize blue economy. And so, in fact, I was just in Imbor, I think it was last Tuesday. We were meeting with Fisher folks. And so, of course, they're asking to prioritize blue economy with us because the resource is becoming more and more scarce. With scarce resources, I guess, it's like the tragedy of the commons kind of issue. Maybe more and more fishing of smaller speeds, smaller amounts. So your point about, being able to log whether you've met the requirements, I think is interesting. But, another important part of keeping track of addressing common resource issues is knowing what stock is out there. And so kind of a leading question here, but I mean, can this be used to then determine fish stocks? I know in Senegal, they've, in the past, I would say decade, what we've heard is that there's just been sort of a push from the population to not monitor fish stocks. And now it seems like there is sort of a re-engagement with the new government to maybe take more of a bite out of knowing where fish stocks are. And then, with that, you need information. Can this be used to give some estimate towards, stock taking?
Sorry, just quickly to clarify, so is the stock in the ocean or in the boat?
Well, in the ocean, I think is what probably matters. I mean, they're related, obviously. But I mean, there's really poor data about fish stocks. And I'm wondering whether this can be used as sort of a sample. As the government asked to see this information, is it publicly available to them?
So as of now, it doesn't have the mechanism for estimating fish stock. I mean, as you know, you have to take a sample of fish stock at different points, at different locations and at different time points, so that you from hatching to growth. So it doesn't have that, but what it does have is, and I appreciate you for your question and thank you for the introduction.
I'm certain we can connect after.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll send you
but what it does is, in terms of supporting sustainable fishery, it has a geofencing capability.
Okay.
The geofencing capability, so there are government restricted zones where they cannot fish. So on the server side, you would enter the coordinates and then it would create a kind of polygon. So when fishermen who are using the app, when they are close to that restricted zone, it would no, this is government restricted zone. You are
turn your app off.
Yeah.
Turn your phone off.
Otherwise, jail. Yeah, something like so. It doesn't say jail, but it would alert them. So that geofencing capability is very, very important. So in supporting sustainable fisheries, so that there will not be overfishing, it does that very well. It also alerts them on international borderlines. So there are borderlines.
There's a 7-mile restriction where artisanal can't go out.
So it would alert them when they are close to international borderlines. But the geofencing of restricted zones from fishing, it's an integral part of it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I heard a similar story from India. So motivation is different. The government wanted to monitor which boat catch how many fishes, where there's complete kind of transparency in the fish kind of the economy, but fishermen hate it, so they just turn off. Why do I care?
Right.
So there was a extreme case being discussed. Maybe they will mount the security camera on the top of the boat and continue monitoring and image recognition to see and detect how many fish and what kind of fish they catch. And fishermen just I don't want that in my
right. That is true. That is true. And for the government and the other interesting things that really they like about this program is that they can see in real time where each fisherman is in the ocean. So
surveillance system.
So as long as the fishermen are using the app, they are visible, for the government. I mean, the fishermen may not want it to be visible to the government, but sometimes they do, because if something goes wrong, they would know from where they would be fetched. And then they have also the option to switch off that. If they don't want to be seen.
And it sounds like that Senegal has more trust in the system, with the government trusting fishermen to report through the app. Fishermen use the app. They don't need to care so much about being monitored by government. I think that's good.
And also they also have the option to switch it off if they don't want. To be seen by the government.
If they really don't want.
But the government isn't using the data right now.
No, they are using it.
They are using the data.
Yeah, they are using it.
Okay.
The Food Security Commission of Senegal, they are using it. It's in their monthly bulletin. The market information related to fish, it's from WISE. I mean, it's integrated with them now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
That trust threshold is interesting. Finding out how many people actually turn it off would be an interesting data point to see how true that heat map.
Yeah, that is true.
That
is true. Yeah. How many fishermen switch off their location and how many they don't?
But maybe they are trustful.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Erica.
Oh yeah, the partnership with Qualcomm is also very interesting.
Yeah.
Is Qualcomm funding?
Qualcomm is funding, yes.
Okay.
Qualcomm funded from the very beginning.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Another thing I picked up. So it was interesting to hear.